Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Exterior Home Solutions. Be sure and check them out online at exteriorhomesolutions.com, or you can certainly give them a call at 865-524-5888 for all of your outdoor needs, roofing, fencing, whatever you got going on outside. Exterior Home Solutions can take care of you. They take care of us, and we certainly thank them for their proud support of Volquest.com. I'm Brent Hubbs along with Grant Ramey and Austin Price. Glad to have you along on this Tuesday installment. A couple things to dive into today, and we'll give you a little recruiting update. Grant Ramey's got all the news you could ever want on Chaz Lanier. I'm sure he's got everything on lockdown on that storyline as well. We'll talk a little bit about the NCAA and the settlement with the case that appears to be happening here in the next little bit with the House case. What does that mean? Nobody seems to know. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about why Tennessee is suddenly good in athletics, seemingly in everything. What's the leading cause for that? So plenty of things to dive into. Let's first start with some recruiting stuff, and we'll start with Chaz Lanier. Grant, you had the news over the weekend. He's going to visit Tennessee. Tennessee has always wanted the last visit. It appears they're going to get the last visit. What do you think anything means right now for Chaz Lanier, or do we know if anything means anything right now?
Well, no, there's not as many updates, obviously, as people want. It's been a very quiet recruitment. They haven't talked publicly very much. I think I've heard them do one podcast interview, and that's about it. It's more about trying to figure out what's going on both sides of those, or both camps and stuff like that, both sides of it. Yeah, it could be good news that you're getting the last visit. It could be risky that you're letting him go to Lexington first and hoping he gets out of there and gets to Knoxville on Tuesday. Obviously, we're recording this. He's not committed. I guess we're kind of gambling ourselves, hoping nothing happens between now and when this podcast is released. But I think it's a lot of what you guys talked about last week on the I guess it was the Mailbag podcast. Like, what was his NBA draft feedback like? Is he trying to make his money now? Or was he told, man, you got a place in this league and you can play at this level? And maybe he's more looking for a fit in terms of the program. So I think it's trying to read tea leaves and figure out what this kid's want. I don't think Tennessee's going to be the biggest offer. I think we've talked about that a lot. I think Kentucky's going to throw a lot of money at him. I think BYU probably offered him a lot during his visit there on Sunday. So it goes Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 3 visits in a row, and then Wednesday starts a dead period for about 2 weeks. So get him to Knoxville, and it feels like you got a pretty good chance, or at least it helps your chances if you can get him there, get him on campus, and go from there.
Pretty wild from the standpoint of, like, we taped this on Monday. Currently, Grant is in a tent behind the University of Tennessee sign right there off of Lake Loudon. Behind the sign, like with Dooley's binoculars.
The binoculars. I got Barney's bush. The leaves taped to my hat.
Are you gonna have a newspaper with a hole cut in it when Opie was getting bullied?
I mean, we got Goober doing the high sign with the peanut butter. Peanut butter in his mouth. He couldn't call like the crow.
Maybe you're going to pull a string across a camera and think you got a picture in the great gas station. Right?
He's Barney dressed up as the old lady or the
mannequin. Or the Mr. Weaver's department store.
He's where they got the different colored jerseys over there at Thompson, like doing football. Like, he's the mannequin. Like, Chaz Lanier walks through.
Grant,
we're 5 minutes into this thing, and it's already off the rails.
Of course,
it's three of us should host a podcast every time.
I mean, it's May, and we really don't know what Chaz Lanier is thinking at this point. Do we think BYU's real, Grant, or is that the leverage team?
I can't imagine. It would stun me. I think if he landed at BYU, because it just, I mean, he's one and done in college. Like, at his next school, like, his thing is to go be a star somewhere and go to the NBA. I would expect you would want to go somewhere that you're going to win a lot of games. And I don't know what BYU looks like next season. They're starting over, obviously, because they lost their head coach to Kentucky. So, I mean, Kentucky's starting over too. But Kentucky is Kentucky, and you're going to expect that to be a little bit of a better roster because of the money they're willing to throw at it and because of the fact that it's Kentucky. So BYU is the out of left field team. BYU is apparently willing to pay up to get the kid, which surprises me a ton because I don't know how much difference it's going to make for your team big picture wise. Go ahead, AP.
I just think BYU is the agent. the agent clearly wants the biggest offer he can get, which a
Correct.
lot of them
So
do,
that's
right?
the lever. That's the
And
leverage.
to Hubs' point, yes, it's the leverage by the agent. I don't think it's the leverage by the kid, but the agent is calling a certain amount of shots here. And so, I think if this comes down to, the agent having any say, this doesn't feel like Tennessee. Now, mom, dad, the kid, if they have the say, I think Tennessee's much more back in play. Agree, Grant, or disagree?
I agree with that. I think the agent is a businessman and he's trying to make money. So he's going to push for the most money.
Yep.
That's what his interests are. I don't think his best the best interest in terms of fit and whatever for Chaz. I think it's the highest bidder, and I think that's what it is.
Yep.
And I think there's people at Tennessee, maybe they're naive, that think that Chaz wants to be at Tennessee. That could be wishful thinking. That could be overconfidence. That could be whatever it is.
Could be
But I
absolutely
think from
correct.
the eight, it could absolutely be correct. Who knows what it's going to be in the next however many, whatever the time frame is on this thing. I do think from the agent side, it's going to be money, and I think from the Tennessee side, it's going to be, hey man, we're saving space for you. We don't save space for anybody. You're the only guy on our board. There's no other names out there. You're trying. They're selling this kid on. We've circled our wagons on you, and that's been it for however many weeks now at this point. And come be that missing piece and be that Dalton Connect kind of role and kind of elevate your draft stock the same way DK did.
How hard do you think this is? I mean, because that's your selling point, but is it falling on? I mean, do you know if it's falling on deaf ears? Like, I just wonder if there's been enough communication between Chaz and the schools that kind of. We don't know what he's looking for. Do schools have an idea what he's looking for?
I would hope so. I'm sure you do have some kind of idea of what he's looking for because that's going to determine how hard you're pushing after him. If he's looking for something that you can't sell him, you might as well, focus on somebody else. So I think there's definitely communication there. He's not talked publicly, but I'm sure he's talked a lot with these schools and knows exactly what he's looking for. They know exactly what he's looking for. It's just a factor of getting onto campus and figuring out the NIL part of it and figuring out, tying up loose ends and figuring out what the answer is going to be for him in the end.
And you're hoping that if you're Tennessee or Kentucky or BYU, you're hoping that this thing's done in the next 2 weeks, Grant? Is that the timeline you would like to be in with summer school starting? And I know you can get guys in later than that, but I mean, to be around teammates and everything else, are you kind of hoping that this thing's wrapped up in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this is the time of year where you start showing up on campus. I mean, Igor Milicic is here. Felix Akbar is here. Darlin Stone-Dubar, I think he just graduated recently from Hofstra, so I'm not sure when he's going to arrive. They haven't announced it if he has arrived. This is the time of year where you get going. Like, you get your team together in the summer, and y'all start working toward the next fall and the next winter. Like, it feels like it's year-round. Like, as soon as one season ends, you reset your roster, and you get right back into the gym. And you do stuff all through the summer. It's teamwork. It's all that kind of stuff. Like, it feels like it never ends. So you want those guys on campus as soon as possible. Technically, he hasn't pulled his name out of the NBA draft yet. He's got until May 29th to do that. That's the date we've been waiting for. Everybody's been talking about, but that doesn't really have any thing to do with his recruitment and maybe when he wants to announce something. But people talk about, like, once these visits start happening, maybe it expedites the process and this thing gets moving a little bit.
So we'll see what happens with Chaz Lanier. Again, scheduled to be on Tennessee's campus. They're scheduled to get the last official visit before the dead period kicks in here. You would think there would not be any visits after the dead period is over, that this thing would be at a finish line, but we'll see exactly what happens with Chaz Lanier here in the next couple of weeks. AP, on the football side of things, we've got some decision dates set. We've got some things potentially on the horizon here. You've got Travis Smith setting a decision date as well with 4 finalists. The 865 event is coming up the end of the week. I know there'll be questions in the Mailbag podcast about that later this week. But where do you think they are in terms of maybe some highlighted names for the 865 weekend, and where are they with a couple of these guys making decisions here in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Or 2 to 3 hours.
No,
Tomorrow, who will announce later today. We'll see. Again, Tennessee left with all the momentum. When he left campus, a few weeks ago, has somebody stolen it back? I don't know that they have. If you're asking me to pick right now, I would pick Tennessee to land him later today. But this is something where you can't discount anything in recruiting anymore. So, that's kind of the next one. After that, Jalen Matthews is June 3rd. It still feels like Tennessee has the most momentum there. Miami continues to swing pretty hard, and a few other schools. And then after that, as far as just pure date set, Charles House, June 22nd. And as you mentioned yesterday, Chad Simmons with the story that Travis Smith will announce on July 13th. So we've got a little while on Travis Smith. And I would expect that to be the case for most of these kids. They're going to take their 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 official visits in June, and then likely make a decision sometime between, let's say, the 25th of June and the 25th of July. Like, I think that's kind of going to be that window. Most of them, I think, will be actually the last week of June through the second week of July. But Smith, Tennessee and Georgia, to me, are the top two teams. I think Auburn is running 3 there. He's been to Georgia so many times. Georgia's going to take 4 million receivers in this class. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where this thing goes. It definitely feels like, to me, Georgia kind of would be the team to beat. I do think Tennessee's still definitely in it, and they definitely could swing it here, with some visits and such coming up over the next couple of weeks. But, I think right now, if you're, saying, where do I think he's leaning? I would lean Georgia, but I don't think it's a lock. I think that the door's still open there with Travis Smith. Georgia, all their media, they're pushing the kid from Milton. How does that play on a kid from Westlake? I think it'd be interesting to kind of see, what he does. But right now I would say lean Georgia, but by not too much.
For both of you guys, are you surprised? I mean, you can take unlimited official visits now. Are you surprised more guys aren't using official visits? A lot of people when that came out are, oh, that's a disaster. A guy can take 8 or 10 official visits. What's going to happen? And it doesn't feel like anybody's taking 5 official visits these days, hardly. To me, am I wrong in that?
I still think people want to get through. They want to do all of June and then come to a decision, because most schools are not one to wait. And unless you're a high-end guy, Grant, you don't really have the carte blanche to, say, hey, I'm going to take some more visits in the fall and drag this thing out to October. Very few kids can do that. And so, especially if you like a school in particular, it's easier to take your visits in June and get your spot locked in.
Maybe I'm just I don't want to leave the house that much. Like, that would be taxing to take unlimited. Like, it felt like 5 was that's enough visits. That's enough official visits. It felt like it didn't need to be unlimited. Like, you could battle for those official visits, and maybe that was some drama there. But I mean, how many are you really going to take through the summer once you get to the point where you've seen it kind of a different version of the same official visit on every different campus you've been to? Like, at some point, that number's too many.
I don't know why they don't do like basketball does and do X amount as a junior, X amount as a senior. And I just think that's the best of both worlds. I think that gives everybody a chance to, kind of get a feel for it a year ahead of time. Am I crazy in thinking that basketball's got to figure it out while football continues to kind of, I don't know, like, it just make it more hectic than it has to be?
Yeah, the interesting thing, Grant, to me with basketball, the windows in basketball seem smaller to take visits. But because you have your high school season, okay, most of the time you're playing on a Friday night, right? So it's hard to take a weekend official visit in season, and then you can't take a bunch of summer visits because you've got AAU and everything you're doing in the summertime going on. It feels like the window for the basketball visits is smaller, whereas the football window is only reduced because of the pressure on kids to make a decision, which goes to Austin's point. Why not do it where you can take, 2 as a junior, or 3 as a junior, and 4 as a senior, 5 as a senior if you want to.
And you're a very different player and a person as a junior to a senior in high school. Like, that's a big difference. Maybe what you see as a junior on a visit kind of opens your eyes, or kind of readjust maybe what you're looking for in that recruitment process, and maybe it readjusts and reevaluates stuff going into your senior year and those senior visits. And I do think that would be something that would help football. And I think sometimes the smaller windows help kids, because I don't know, unlimited time to think about it can certainly hurt you if you're paralysis by analysis. Or whatever there. I do think for the junior senior split would help a lot, because you get to see more at different, the windows are smaller, but you are kind of stretching out visit time, that evaluation period where you can kind of compare and contrast what you're looking for, what you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, AP, the portal, because the portal windows are smaller, guys are having to make quicker decisions, make decisions. You don't get some of that, paralysis, if you will, because you got to go, right? I mean, listen, I mean, Chaz Lanier's people can want it to drag out as long as they want to, but I mean, he's going to have to make a decision at some point and join a basketball team somewhere if he's going to play college basketball. And I think what you're saying in football, a lot of high school coaches are telling kids, hey, I don't want to deal with this all fall long. And a lot of college coaches are going, hey, if you don't jump in now, I don't guarantee you anything in December, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at Clemson. I mean, Dabo has dug his heels in.
They signed 25 transfers a year, AP.
Yeah, they do. He's dug his heels in. You know who Dabo is? He is all of our grandmas. Old, set in their ways. They're not changing. He's not changing.
Yeah.
That's who he's going to be. And so he's not going to play in the portal a whole lot. He's going to continue to try to, pressure these kids in. When you visit the first weekend of June, if you don't commit, we're moving on without you. You better get in. You better get while it's hot. Better get it. And more and more kids are wising up to that. I mean, some kids are absolutely. If you like Clemson and you're close, go for it, right? I mean, like that's where you want to go.
It's not a bad place. I mean,
heck no. But I mean, but if a kid's not ready, like Mike Matthews last year, once he didn't commit to him, like they were pretty much done with Mike. Now they moved on to the kid from Texas and stuff because again, that's the route they go. They want everybody in that first week because they want to go to the lake over there in Clemson, the back part of June. They don't want to have to do any kind of weekends. Whereas like Tennessee is backloaded. Those last 2 weekends are just massive weekends. Where a year ago, they're even bigger this year. And so, it just kind of be interesting to kind of see how some of this stuff shakes out, as we move forward with, kind of different templates, so to speak, by coaches, programs, and then kids.
Yeah, and it's the ever-evolving calendar. What it is one year may not be what it is the next year, right? I mean, I don't know that many junior basketball players are taking official visits at this point in time, Grant. I mean, it doesn't feel like they are because it's all about the
basketball. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say with the basketball. Like Rob mentioned it last week. Like, I mean, this past weekend was a live evaluation period, EYBL and all that stuff, and usually in a different era, that's huge news. Where's your coaches at? Where are your assistants at? Who are they watching? Who are they? They're at every game for this kid, whatever. It feels like that's so far on the back burner because of the portal and because of this time of year. And you've reworked your roster already for the most part because of that early rush in late March and April to get to this point. So it feels like with basketball, you could rework the calendar, you could do this, that, whatever. You could make a ton of changes. And it doesn't really matter because the portal is such an emphasis. And you're changing, with such a smaller scholarship roster, you change the roster so much with those portal moves, just because there's so limited players, and that helps you. You can look drastically different and take one high school kid from year to year because of the portal.
Yeah, and that's why you got to decide: do you want to invest in recruiting a high school kid from the time he's in the 8th grade until he's a senior, or do you want to just say, hey, I'll get the best couple of guys out of the portal who have already proven against some Power 5 competition, revamp my roster, and go that way. Interesting times in basketball, certainly. Interesting times in football. There's a bit of a recruiting update, as Austin mentioned, backloaded in June. The end of June for Tennessee set to be pretty wild in terms of number of visits, right, AP? 24 plus is not out of the realm at all the last couple of weekends, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, okay, Tennessee set up to have these massive weekends at the end. How many kids that they're recruiting decide to make a decision before they take their visit? You actually could lose a few kids. But if you're a fan and you're sitting there and you're watching all these busy visit weekends there early, you're like, man, this it's going to be interesting. It's like the horse that kind of rides at the back the first part of the race and then all of a sudden tries to hit go. You better hope that there's a lot of clean air up there, right? Like you don't want to if it's a bad track and it's muddy, it could get a little bit more problematic, near the end of June as far as recruiting. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how this goes. And I would advise all fans to understand, Tennessee's going to have to make their hay the weekend of the 14th and the 21st, not the first 2 weekends. They'll have some kids, I'll have about 7 or so, 6, 7 kids here that first weekend of the 7th. But I mean, of June. But like, it's going to be slow out of the gates here as things start to open back up. It'll be more focused on the camps, and then the OVs will be really pushed towards the back of the month.
Yep, and we'll keep it all tracked for you as you see on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you see a bunch of names already there. We'll continue to log all those names and have that ready for you. It's going to change dramatically throughout the month of June. We will cover all that for you here at Volquest.com. When we come back on the other side of an update from our friends at Exterior Home Solutions, we'll talk about why Tennessee's an all-everything school, and then we'll hit a little bit on what is an important week for college football and college athletics and what it could mean, and yet another court case that the NCAA is trying to settle and get out of and pass the financial payment on to a lot of schools who, quite frankly, are going to struggle, I think, with some of that money. And that's why you're seeing some of those schools already starting to fight back and bite back a little bit about this potential settlement. We'll dive a little bit into that and certainly talk about why Tennessee's having so much success. That's coming up as you listen to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Exterior Home Solutions.
Severe weather can strike at any time in East Tennessee, and Mother Nature can do severe damage to the first and most important line of defense that you and your family have against Mother Nature, and that is your roof. Whenever she strikes, make sure that you call the people that I call. Make sure you trust the people that I trust, and that's my friends at Exterior Home Solutions, because they're more than friends, they're truly family.
As I mentioned, it is an important week potentially with the NCAA and the House versus the NCAA settlement case, or that case that could reach a settlement. Here's a couple of things that are potential out there, guys, for the settlement. $2.7 billion expected in back damages to former athletes. The NCAA said they're going to be responsible for 40% of it, and 60% of it will come from a reduction in school distributions. There are a lot of schools that are non-FBS Division I football teams, particularly in the Big East. They've got a problem with this number. When you're talking about $5 to $7 million annually that you could lose, okay, that you're going to have to pay out. And then on top of that, there's talk of revenue sharing. Pete Nikos has had a full update on this, does a terrific job covering all this stuff. You need to follow that at On3. Also, Ross Dellinger. I know he's not an On3 guy, but Ross has got great ties to the NCAA in terms of sources. He's got a lot of information out on this. Guys, this to me is a lot of what Danny White's been talking about here, and that is this patchwork deal. I mean, there's okay, solution, settlement, all this other stuff. How are schools supposed to make it when football's not their cash cow? Connecticut, right? I mean, Connecticut's an example of that. Their football's a struggle financially. Basketball, they're really good. Now you're telling them, hey, you're going to have to find $70 million. You're going to have to cut $70 million out of your revenue stream over the course of the next, 7 to 10 years. We're going to take that out of your revenue stream. 5 to 7 million a year are just going to be out. I mean, how are these teams? Look, let's take Tennessee out of the equation, Grant, because they got some money, okay? But even some teams in the SEC, how are you supposed to manage all of this? And then on top of that, maybe a $20 million rev share.
It's a fun time to be an athletic director. It's a fun time to try to figure that out. I mean, 2.7 billion, that's just a number that's hard to wrap your mind around. And then 60% of that. And the 5 to 7 million, I mean, that seems minuscule compared to the other numbers you're throwing around. But yeah, to find that annually, I have no idea where that comes. I don't know, like, what are you cutting, or what corners are you cutting if you're not cutting programs, or what's going on there? Like, this is when an athletic director makes his money, because you're going to have to figure out, or her money, because you're going to have to figure out where this money's coming from. I don't understand how any of this is going to get. I just, like, how far do these back payments go to these players? Like, I don't this is above my pay grade in trying to figure out this stuff, and my brain power does not go that high, because I don't understand where the money's supposed to come from, how you're supposed to find out what corners you're supposed to cut. AP, if you have any other a better idea, a grasp of it than I do.
Nope. I mean, again, like, it's everybody wants their hand in the cookie jar at this point. Guys that played in the 60s and 70s are like, whoa, 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 whoa. What about us? And I mean, the kids that played 5 years ago, but even more, kids currently, it just, again, I don't. Once you kind of rip the Band-Aid off, I mean, that wound gets bigger and bigger and bigger for the NCAA.
Well, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. It almost feels like, I mean, listen, what you're paying to former athletes doesn't have anything to do with the current rev share, but it's almost like rev share is kind of getting lumped into the potential settlement here, right? Former athletes could care less about rev share.
Yep.
It doesn't affect them in any day of the week. So it's almost like you're kind of putting that in there. But how's rev share going to fix anything? I mean, rev share is not eliminating collectives, right, AP? I feel like Spire's as healthy as they've been, and they're not the only collective around the country that's healthy, right?
No,
it feels like the people who have done it the right way have settled into a business model that they're making work, that's helping the school that they're, quote, attached to in that way. This is not going to eliminate the NIL side of things, right?
No, because NIL is name, image, and likeness. It's marketing dollars. Now, let's face it. NIL morphed into pay for play, and they can say it's NIL. We can call it NIL and all that stuff, but like at the end of the day, it's pay for play, and
that's not going away. Now that's just you're stacking money on top of money, right, for the student athlete. Am I missing something in that regard? And if I am, somebody please explain.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, like, let's face it. Let's say every kid now, rowers, golfers, quarterback on the football team is going to make $180,000 a year. Let's just use that number. Well, you know as I do, to get the top flight quarterback, you have to pay a lot more than that. So that's where the NIL collectives still come back into play, and the NCAA wants to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and we're going to do this and that. Good luck. I mean, it's why Andy Staples just keeps making fun of it. Every time they, Ross Dellinger will put out a tweet about something, and it's like, well, the NCAA wants to do this, and just gets like tongue in cheek, like good luck. I mean, like seriously, like it's one of those things where like everybody needs some type of reform. Everybody needs there to be some guardrails and parameters, but nobody knows how to give tangible solutions because of what you just said earlier. Okay, sure, yeah, for the SEC schools, doing this sounds all great, but like for those schools that don't have a football program, they still have really successful athletic programs. They're not making as much money, and so it's. I don't know how to do it, and I don't think anybody does to appease everyone. At the end of the day, somebody's going to be frustrated and mad.
Yeah, they are, and there's a lot of them who are frustrated and mad right now, and some of them are athletic directors around the country. And that's why you're seeing some of the talk this week about, voting against it or publicly saying they're against it in some of these conference calls that they're having and all these discussions. So we'll see. I mean, you don't have to, you can put all of your rivalries to the side because everybody will unitedly agree something needs to be done. And everybody unitedly says, well, I'm not sure exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
And this person's opinion is very different from this person's opinion because their situations are different, right? I mean, like where Wake Forest is different than where Clemson is financially. Where Tennessee is different than where Mississippi State is financially or Vanderbilt. That's just the reality of it. Now, does that mean everybody's supposed to break away and the haves all, live in the country club and the have-nots don't? I mean, I don't know, but they've got a timeline here to get a settlement, but the settlement doesn't solve a whole lot of problems other than it's going to cost a lot of money to a lot of people.
Grant, I don't know about you, Grant. I know Hubs eats at home all the time, so I'm going to take him out of this discussion. But for me, it's like prices or Deerdorfs get together for dinner. We all know that we've got to come to a decision on dinner, but trying to come to one and everybody coming up with a solution, the only person that stands true in this thing is my daughter who wants steak and my father-in-law who wants eggs. Other than that, it's a free-for-all.
It's World War III. Wait, Waffle House has got both of those things.
There you go. They do. Or you can be a dictator like I am on the farm, and I just send out a menu on Friday for what we're having next week. And if you don't show up and eat, then you can just go somewhere else. I don't think you can pull that off in the world of the NCAA and college athletics right now.
And you wonder what he's like to work for, folks.
Yeah. the NCAA would like to have some kind of answer like that, but that's just that toothpaste is long beyond that. Too many people are sitting at the table with an opinion and with rights, and including the student athlete, to get rid of to make that change. So we'll see. That this is going to be part of the summer headlines for sure as SEC meetings take place and everything else over the course of the next few weeks. We'll see when there's news. We'll obviously talk about it. Not going to beat the debate to death, because nobody has a real answer to that. Not a debate, but one of the interesting things over the weekend, by the way, congratulations to the golf team, punched a ticket. The women's tennis team gets to the Final Four. Tony Vitello's team are we calling them co-SEC champs, or when you have a tiebreaker, don't you just become the SEC champ? Is it really a co-champion thing?
Yeah,
what's the official terminology there?
Well, it's co-champs. It's no different than Tennessee hanging a banner for Eastern Division champs in the football complex for years, that they tied with Georgia but lost the tiebreaker back in the mid 2000s and didn't go to Atlanta. Yeah, I mean, they're co-champs, but Tennessee's the overall number 1 seed because they won the tiebreaker and beat Kentucky 2 out of 3. To your point, the men's tennis team makes the Elite Eight. Softball is rolling into the super regionals, having
back-to-back regular season champs for softball, by the way.
Yeah. Volquest, the undisputed number 1 team covering the Tennessee athletics program.
So my question is this: why has everything seemed to merge together? I know the mantra, the hashtag ran it, everything school. Well, why is it this way right now? I mean, for a school that walked through the desert, for forever, it feels like. Why is it all in harmony? Why is there so much success at Tennessee right now?
To quote my friend Billy Haley in Nashville, winners win. I think you hire winners, you make good hires, they win. Tony Vitello, I was talking with Eric about this the other day. Like when I was in school, 06 to 10 at Tennessee, I watched a lot of Todd Riley baseball. I covered a lot of Todd Riley baseball. You could count on 2 hands the number of people that were at Lindsey Nelson Stadium for a midweek game. The program could not be less relevant. That's why I, as a student, was there covering the team. That's all I could do. Like, it's hard to wrap my mind around how quickly he turned it around, B, how consistent he's been, how he continues to build upon what he's already done, which has been crazy. The year over year success that he's had has been crazy. I mean, softball is softball. Like, you hold them to a different standard because they've been winning for so long. Like, they've been winning for a long, long time. So it's not surprising when they're winning the SEC back-to-back seasons, or when they're going to super regional, when they're hosting super regionals. And obviously, what Rick has done with basketball in terms of just the year-over-year consistency and success is pretty unprecedented, and kind of a little bit, not a lot of guys have done that with Tennessee basketball. So, I mean, I think it's the guys that have been hired, the men and women that have been hired, that have immediately flipped their programs around and built winning cultures and continued that consistently throughout. I think it just starts there because, like Al Davis said, you get good coaches, you get good players, you just win, baby. I mean, that's it. Like, go get good, get elite talent, get elite coaches, and win ball games. It feels like that's what a lot of these different programs have been doing.
What's fascinating to me, Austin, when you look at this is, and I'm not taking anything away from Danny White, and obviously he's let his coaches coach, and he's given them all the resources they need to win, and there's a winning attitude and a winning culture in place for all sports, not just about a single sport. Nobody's a football person or a basketball AD. I mean, it literally is an everything. But to me, what's fascinating is John Curry, who by the standards of every Tennessee fan was a disaster because of the whole coaching debacle and the search, he lands you Tony Vitello. Okay. I mean, he found a winner, an up-and-comer that nobody knew who he was when he was hired. Dave Hart goes and hires Rick Barnes, who a lot of people thought was out of gas and the tank was empty for Rick, right? Like, this was a soft landing spot for a guy who was in the twilight of his career, and instead it's a resurgence for him. But Dave Hart does that. He doesn't get a lot of credit for it because everybody talks about, everybody that Dave Hart made mad on campus with all the things he tried to do with the elimination of logos and, fighting with the city on everything and liking a good backstreet fight whenever he can get that. My point is, you can't say this one person fixed it, right? It's been a combination of people who got some things right along the way. I mean, Philip Fulmer hired the volleyball coach, who went to the Elite Sweet 16 or Elite 8, the golf coach. So it's been kind of all of them. It's just all come together here under Danny White, but they were all hired by a bunch of different people.
Yeah, and those different sports started to trend in the right direction before Danny got here. But again, he, in some ways, comes around at a great time as they were blooming. But, as you said, lets his coaches coach. I think provides an atmosphere of fun. Tries to make things an event. All that helps in recruiting. And at the end of the day, he hired the one sport that matters. Like, not that the others don't matter, they all do. But like when football is really good and starting to get back to being really good, I mean, Brennan Webb, the golf coach, will tell you, when do they like to bring kids on OVs? During football season. Why? Because they get to see all of it, right? What Dalton Connect do? He came in for what? The spring game. Was blown away by the 40,000 for a spring game, and it left an impression on him. So, like, again, Danny made the correct hire for football. It got right, and then all it did was throw a little fertilizer on plants that were already blooming nicely and made them bloom even brighter with these other sports.
Is it that
for me, exactly what AP said with football. For me, it puts into context, like, you understand how big football is and how important it is, but this puts it even more into context, like crystal clear. Like, yeah, Tony Vitello, A+++ hire, elite as it gets. That's a great hire for John Curry. Nobody remembers it because John Curry was like Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner during that coaching search, and it was a disaster. Like, that's all people are going to remember. And Dave Hart, too. Rick was, in hindsight, a great hire. I mean, he was the third coach in 3 years. They were lost. They needed somebody to come in and stabilize and have a culture and win. And that's exactly what Rick has done during his time here. That's an elite hire, but Dave doesn't get remembered for that. And why everybody gives Danny White so much credit is because football was in a terrible place in January 2021. And, he hired the guy that he had at UCF, and nobody got real fired up about that. But he's come in here, and Josh Heupel has won, and he's taken a bad situation, and he had them beating Alabama in 2022, and fans storming the field, and all that scene, and it's not only what he's done, but it's also kind of the Nico era is just getting started, and he's done so well in quarterback recruiting, among other things. I mean, it's football pays the bills, and football stirs the pot, and the AP is exactly right about Dalton Connect. I mean, when a spring game sells you on a basketball kid who becomes a guy that you probably need to retire his jersey, and he's a program legend, like, that tells you what football is and how much it means. And if you're an AD, you're a great AD if football's great. You're a bad AD if football's bad.
Yeah, you're right. And here's the other question, and we'll get ready to go out the door on this. Do you think fans pay attention to other sports more when football is good?
Yes.
100%.
But listen, baseball had fans, but is baseball further elevated because football's in a good place? Is basketball, which has been good, is there more passion there when football is good, or is that too simple?
I will say this. I think because football had been in the wilderness, Tennessee fans were gravitating towards anything that showed a pulse. And basketball showed a pulse. Baseball showed a pulse. And so all of a sudden you start selling out Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And then in 22, you're getting all those home runs and this and that. And it just, to me, it kind of just expanded on that. Like, Tennessee fans were just looking to find something to be happy about because football had been such a dumpster fire for so long. And so now that they've gotten back to being pretty relevant again, and baseball continues on its path, basketball is doing its thing, you start to see some traction in other sports. The people that love golf are paying attention to what Brennan Webb did.
Not because of football, but because they love golf.
Yeah, people that love tennis are have paid attention to it. Pay attention to what the tennis team is doing. And so. And because Tennessee's not been to a Final Four since Candace Parker was here, and now she's retired from the WNBA, all that spotlight goes to the Lady Vols, and now Danny White's made a move. He's hired Kim Caldwell. We'll see how she does. But obviously there's a lot of attention on that. So it will be interesting just to see how it all goes. But I do think it's yes and no. Like, I do think that, like, football definitely helps. But when Tennessee was so bad for so long in football, fans were just grasping at anything that showed a pulse in as far as winning, because they need something. What did Tennessee fans love to do? I told my wife when we were driving on Sunday or Saturday, if Tennessee can win this game, if Vanderbilt holds on, I said Tennessee fans are going to be so obnoxious in Kentucky's Twitter. They love that, and they've not. And for a while, they didn't have a reason to be obnoxious about anything. So all of a sudden, it's like, ooh, we can be obnoxious about Tony and the baseball team. Ooh, basketball. Now football. Now everything, and they can just, and then it's what it is.
Brett, how much does the personality of Tony Vitello and Rick Barnes, although they're opposite, but how much does their personalities, how much has that helped interest? Winning's winning, right? There's no doubt about that. But to Austin's point about the blooming and starting to build, how much of it was you got a baseball coach who's brash, who's getting thrown out of a game, suspended, and selling lemonade outside the stadium, early in his career, and he's not afraid to mix it up with people. And then you've got Rick Barnes, who's, and Mr. Intense coach who's winning games, but he's also this, do good everything in the community for people. He's a jokester, prankster, all that stuff. How much has that helped, do you think, just having those personalities?
Yeah, it does start with winning, and that's what they have in common. With Tony and his personality and, just that brashness you talked about, that confidence, like they're not only going to win, but they're going to let you know about winning, and they're going to hit a lot of home runs. They're going to have great pitching. They're going to do all that stuff. But it is that they're fun to watch. It's a fun program to follow because of the way they win games. Some people hate if it's not your team, you hate that team. But if it's your team, you love it and you dig your heels in. And they support that team at every turn. With Rick, I think it's also part of he's built this thing on like 3-star guys and kind of under the radar guys and guys that people didn't really know about. Like Admiral Schofield was a Donnie Tyndall guy, but he kept Admiral and he turned him and Grant Williams into something, and he turned, he went and found Zakai Ziegler. Like they've done so much better with these kind of chip on their shoulder, under the radar recruits than they've done with the 5-star guys, the elite guys. Like Dalton Connect was not a 5-star. Everybody in the world wanted him for his entire time in the portal. He was a little bit more of a find. So I think it's also that, like, they're going to show up and they're going to play really tough defense, and they're hopefully going to have enough offense to win basketball games. And they've won at such a consistent level. Like it always goes back to winning. Like they've won at such a consistent level, basketball, baseball, you name it. Like, it's great when football's great and the high tide lifts all boats, but if you're going to win, people are going to follow your program, especially Tennessee fans. They're going to show up and make a big deal about it. And they've won at an elite level. A lot of different programs have at this point for a few years now.
Pretty interesting that football's trying to hold up their end of the bargain for a chase for championships, and it's a football team that beat Alabama in 22 and gave Tennessee the biggest moment that they've had. But everybody has elevated their game. I mean, Tennessee's in a place, if you're a fan, this is a golden era and a golden moment for you. Enjoy every second of it. We're going to follow the heck out of it. Eric Kane's got your baseball coverage. We're going to continue to follow plenty of recruiting. Grant Ramey's going to stake out in every way possible. He might get him a little motorcycle with a sidecar, okay, and start writing tickets at the top of the hill. Right,
check one chicky, baby. Check one chicky.
If you give him 5, they'll take 10, Grant Ramey. All right,
I'm 5 miles an hour over Turner's grave.
That's exactly right. I've successfully completed this podcast with way too many Andy Griffith references.
Hub sounds like he's been to the Morrison sisters' house.
We got a magic flower machine over here, that's for sure. That's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Volquest.com podcast. Keep locked in at Volquest for all of your latest recruiting news. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to check out the great deal we've got going on right now for you at YouTube. Just punch in the code right there. It is UT1. You get $1 for 2 months. We thank you for the support on YouTube. Move on over and also be a part of the Volquest family as well. Hit like and subscribe, and be sure and thank our good friends at Exterior Home Solutions. That's going to do it for this edition. He is Grant Ramey, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.